discussions are recorded, and you can view all of the online racial discussions. So if you missed any of those, you're welcome to join us online. You can join us online at beckcenter.net. Click on racial justice, and every one of those 6-part series, you're welcome to join with us and connect with us and see those if you've missed any. We invite you to do that. We always invite you to support the Beck Culture Exchange Center and the work that we do. Beck is the place where Black history and culture are preserved. Today, I'm wearing my Dr. Martin Luther King Commemorative Commission badge. I see Dr. Middlebrook's on here with us. We're going to have a good time. But I also wanted to see, I think, Deborah Hall, Sister Deborah Porter is with us today on behalf of the Dr. Martin Luther King Commemorative Commission. So we want to celebrate the 39th year of the Dr. Martin Luther King Commemorative Commission. So we have joined them to be in partnership with us on this conversation. So let me introduce the song, present to others for a nice warm welcome on behalf of the Dr. Martin Luther King Commemorative Commission, Miss Deborah Porter, the chair of the Dr. Martin Luther King Commission.
Thank you so very much, Reverend Renee, and we are so happy to be here with you and with all of you partnering with this tremendous event tonight. I am just so in awe of getting to hear each and every one of the speakers, and I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to you and to the commission for allowing this to happen. Of course, we are virtual in a lot of our events this year because of the pandemic, and have a lot of things planned and partnering and co-partnering with the University of Tennessee, the Knoxville Opera, Jack and Jill Incorporated, just so many organizations, the YWCA, so many organizations that we are partnering with and doing it virtually. So we will take our events all the way up to June 19th. Juneteenth will be where we partner with the Beck again, and we will have our memorial parade, our memorial march. So we're doing this. We wanted to some kind of way make things happen throughout the year. And this time we've been forced to make it happen. So we will have our April events, our luncheon, leadership symposium, whether it's virtual or a hybrid of both in person and virtual. We will make that happen. March is our in-service, Teachers in Service Day. And June, we definitely will also have our youth symposium. We haven't left our youth out. So we will have our youth symposium in June, the first Saturday in June. So there are still a myriad of activities to happen. And just on the holiday itself, which is the biggie for us, which is January the 18th, we will definitely have our community conversation from 4 to 6 on January the 18th with OREPA, the Oak Ridge Educational
Environmental
Peace Alliance.
I got you.
Peace Alliance. I'll get it in a minute when I don't have things right in front of me and I'm talking off the cuff. But definitely we will have that event as well on the 18th at 4. So we are partnering with UT. There's another event, January the 27th, that we'll be partnering with UT, Reverend Renee. So thank you so much for allowing us to give you that information.
Well, thank you, Sister Deb, and all of the Dr. Martin Luther King Commemorative Commission for the great work that they do, and certainly looks like they're going to be doing year-round. So we're looking forward to the events. We are in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of a racial pandemic and a health pandemic, but we're not stopping the important work that needs to go on. I mentioned to you before that we have some young people that have been very instrumental in the work that we do here at Beck. When we did the 8th of August Jubilee, we had our youth panel, and after that, if you were there and you heard the young people talking, they said, we want to be involved. We want to be a part of it, and we don't want it to stop with just a conversation. And I said to them that if you're serious, then let's go for it. And they were serious. They reached out to me, and we created the Beck Young People's Council. So it is made up of young students who are in high school, upper level high school into collegiate years. And so joining us today, that's the leadership team, part of the leadership team of the Young People's Council that's here at Beck now is our very own chairperson, Miss Jacqueline White. Jacqueline White is actually a graduate of West High School, and she is now at the University of Memphis, Dr. Middlebrook.
Yes.
She is she's at the University of Memphis. My daughter was out there. Memphis is, of course, Dr. Middlebrook's home. And so Jacqueline is doing wonderful things, and they're going to change the world. And they love Black history, they love Black culture, and they're leading, and I'm following, and I'm loving walking alongside them. Also joining me in moderating is the Young People's Council co-chair, Davian Hall. Davian Hall is a graduate of Central High School. Right, Davion? And Davion's an athlete, football player, and he is at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. And so these collegiate students are back here. If I could tell you some of the things that they're doing, I wouldn't stop. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce them to help me co-host this event so we can get to our panelists right away. So take it away, Jacqueline and Davion.
Hi, like Ms. Renee said, I'm Davion Hall. I'm the vice chair of the Young People's Council. The council is a group of like-minded young adults whose mission is to create new leaders of the world, to change our communities and change our lives for the better. The council started at the interest of participants of a racial justice call like this one. We're planning and wanting to accomplish many things that are going to impact our communities. We plan to do community service, advocate for changes in our education system, have conversations with our elected officials, create new positive relationships with the police, and various other projects. The council members are Jacqueline White, Davion Hall, Michael Johnson, David Dupree Jr., and Ayano Albright. Jacqueline and I are honored to be on this call with individuals who fought for what's right and over so many opportunities for people of the next generation that look just like us.
Yes, so hi, my name is Jacqueline White. I am the chair of the Beck Young People's Council. And again, I just want to say thank you for all of the panelists that are on this call. Again, we commemorate the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for the Civil Rights Movement, born January 15th, 1929, who exemplified hope, grace, and peace. Dr. King was a very distinguished man, graduating high school at the age of 15. He attended Morehouse College at the age of 19 and was a member of the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. His famous I Have a Dream speech still resonates with us today. This just goes to show how powerful his words were. Today is his birthday, and we will remember his legacy and what he stood for. King's speeches and writings, specifically his letter from a Birmingham jail, has influenced many people. His legacy still lives on, and I'm for sure that it will live on forever. King had a lasting impact on the entire world with his speeches and actions. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was married to Coretta Scott and had 4 children: Yolanda King, Martin Luther King III, Dexter Scott King, and Bernice King. Unfortunately, on April the 4th, 1968, Dr. King was assassinated in Memphis at the Lorraine Motel, only just being 39 years old. Sorry. He was there to leave a peaceful march. Today, he would have been 92 years old. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. vision is still in the forefront of many protests and demonstrations. We thank Dr. King for all that he stood for. I leave you with this quote today. If you succumb to the temptation of using violence in the struggle, unborn generations will be the recipients of a long and desolate night of bitterness, and your chief legacy to the future will be an endless reign of meaningless chaos.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Now we will introduce our very special guest. First, we have Mr. Lorenza Glasglow. At the age of 16, Mr. Glasgow attended civil rights rallies and mass meetings. He participated in demonstrations at the Tennessee Theater and the Knoxville Civic Auditorium. The purposes were to integrate the theater and to protest the selection of Knoxville as an all-American city by the Look magazine in 1963. Mr. Glasgow was arrested twice by the Knoxville police during the protests at the Tennessee Theater. Mr. Glasgow was born and raised in Knoxville. He was graduated from Austin High School in 1964 and attended the University of Tennessee. Mr. Glasgow is a U.S. Navy veteran and a Ramadas retiree where he was a chemical operator. Mr. Glasgow attended Tabernacle Baptist Church, where he served as a trustee and sang in the male chorus. In the community, he volunteered in services to participants in the One Love Equestrian Ministries. Mr. Glasgow is married to Mrs. Brenda Glasgow and has two daughters, son-in-laws, and five grandchildren. The family has made its home in the Atlanta area. He is the member of the Springfield Baptist Church in Conyers, Georgia, where he sings in the Covenant Nation male chorus.
Okay, our next guest is Bishop Warren Brown. Mr. Brown is a native of Knoxville, Tennessee. Bishop Brown has been a lifelong member of the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, beginning his ministry at Logan Temple AME Zion Church and First AME Zion Church, Knoxville. Bishop Brown graduated from Austin High in 1959 and from Knoxville College in 1963. While a student at the Knoxville College, Bishop Brown was a student leader in civil rights along with many others. Bishop Brown was a pastor in the AME Zion Church for 38 years before elected a bishop by the AME Zion Church General Conference, August 1996. Bishop Brown was consecrated the 91st bishop in the line of succession of the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. Bishop Brown has served 2 Episcopal districts for over 20 years and has provided outstanding leadership to each district. As an active bishop, he served conferences in India, United Kingdom, Angola, Ghana, Togo, Liberia, Malawi, South Africa, St. Vincent, and the United States. Bishop Brown is married to Aurelia Sanders Brown, also of Knoxville, and Bishop Brown is the brother of Daniel Brown, former mayor of Knoxville. Bishop Brown has written his lifelong story in a book titled A Short, Long Way. You can purchase Bishop Brown's book here at the Beck. It is available for $20.
Very good. Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Theodis Robinson Jr. As a plaintiff in the lawsuit to desegregate the Knoxville City Schools, a participant in the downtown demonstrations at the lunch counters, movie theaters, and protest marches, Dr. Theodis Robinson Jr. has been an iconic leader in the civil rights movement. Dr. Robinson was the first African-American undergraduate student admitted to the University of Tennessee and the first Black elected to the Knoxville City Council in more than half a century. He served as the vice president of the economic development for the 1982 World's Fair, and later as the vice president for equity and diversity at UT before retiring in 2014. In 2019, Dr. Robinson was recognized as a distinguished alumnus by the Alumni Board, and the UT Board of Trustees awarded the degree of a Doctor of Social Work to him. Dr. Robinson currently writes a political opinion column for the Knoxville News Sentinel.
Okay, our next guest is Reverend Dr. Harold Middlebrook. Born in Memphis, the Reverend Harold Middlebrook was also a friend of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and an active member of the civil rights movement. Reverend Middlebrook first became involved with the civil rights movement during his student years at Morehouse in the early 1960s. At Morehouse, he met Dr. King, then president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Reverend Middlebrook's association with the King family continued as he served as the youth minister at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, where both King and his father held pastorates. Reverend Middlebrook also became a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and participated in several sit-ins in Atlanta. In 1965, Reverend Middlebrook directed the SCLC's Selma field office during the group's Alabama boycott. After the boycott failed, Dr. King chose Middlebrook to restore the morale of the African American community, which was openly hostile towards the SCLC's abandonment of the town. Soon thereafter, he organized a voter registration campaign that resulted in the registration of 54 new voters. In 1968, as assistant pastor to Reverend Benjamin Hooks at Middle Baptist Church in Memphis, Reverend Middlebrook served on the strategy committee of the community on the Move for Equality, where he organized youth activities. In March of that year, the American Federation of State, County, and municipal employees organized a strike in Memphis after the city fired an African-American sanitation worker because of his union activities. The COME also supported the influential strike, during which signs that read, quote, "I am a man," became symbols of the civil rights movement. As a member of Community on the Move for Equality's Strategy Committee, Reverend Middlebrook was instrumental in securing the appearance of Martin Luther King Jr. in support of the strike, which lasted 65 days. In mid-March, Dr. King visited Memphis to lead a mass march. King returned to Memphis on April the 3rd to offer further support to the strikers. The next day, King met with friends, including Harold Middlebrook, at the Lorraine Motel to plan the next mass march. As he leaned over the balcony railing to speak to the people in the courtyard, a single gunshot tore through his neck and chin. 4 days after Dr. King's assassination, the city of Memphis met most of the workers' demands. Reverend Middlebrook is a founding member of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commemorative Commission, which he chaired until 2000. Middlebrook has appeared in several films on the civil rights movement, including the 1993 documentary At the River I Stand, an adaptation of Joan Turner Booth's book by the same title, and the 1998 Oliver Stone documentary Assassinated: The Last Days of King and Kennedy.
And last but certainly not least is our very own Mr. Robert Booker. Mr. Booker is a native of Knoxville, Tennessee. He graduated from Austin High School in 1953. He spent 3 years in the U.S. Army in France and England as an information education specialist. In 1962, he graduated from Knoxville College, where he majored in English and minored in French. At Knoxville College, he was a two-term president of the student body and spent the summer of 1961 in Guinea, West Africa, in Operation Crossroads, Africa. As a student leader, he helped to initiate and conduct the sit-in movement in Knoxville to desegregate downtown lunch counters and movie theaters. During his freshman year, he was elected president of the campus chapter of the NAACP. In 1967, Mr. Booker became the first Black ever elected from Knoxville to the state legislature. He was elected to 3 terms, serving until 1972. Mr. Booker served a total of 7 years as administrative assistant to Mayor Kyle Testerman of the Knoxville. He was appointed by Governor Lamar Alexander as the first Black ever to serve on the Tennessee Civil Service Commission. Mr. Booker was the executive director of the Beck Culture Exchange Center for 17 years. He is the historian for Beck, Knoxville College, Tabernacle Baptist Church, and for Knoxville. He is the founding president of the National Austin High Alumni Association. From 1987 to 1991, he wrote a weekly column for the Old Knoxville Journal, and since 2003, he has written a weekly column for the Knoxville News Sentinel. For over 4 decades, Mr. Booker has done extensive research on history of Knoxville and has authored numerous publications, including The Story of Mechanicsville, 1875 to 2008, and The Story of East Knoxville from the beginning of 1856 to 2004. His books include the re-release of The Heat of the Red Summer, Race Mixing, Race Rioting in 1919 Knoxville, 200 Years of Black Culture in Knoxville, Tennessee, 1791 to 1991, and There Was Light, the 120-year history of Knoxville College, Knoxville, Tennessee, 1875 to 1995, and Encyclopedia Experiences of Black People in Knoxville, Tennessee, 1844 to 1974, and From the Bottom Up. And all his books can be purchased at Beck.
Thank you so much, Davian, and thank you so much, Jacqueline. So you can see the magnitude of the caliber of people we have on this panel. So we are so delighted to have every one of them here. So we're going to kick this off right now. So we have a list of questions, but I think we would be remiss, given the moment that we're in right now, this whole conversation, we're going to get to civil rights, but the first question, I feel like we have to kind of get it out there. This is a whole conversation about racial justice. Our world is in the middle of a double pandemic, a racial pandemic and a health pandemic. And right now we just witnessed some unsettling circumstances as a result of what happened at the Capitol 1 week ago on Wednesday, January the 6th. And so my question is simply this: can you just give us a statement about the incidents of January the 6th? We're in the moment where we're about to transition power to a new president, and our country is in an uproar. And all of you have participated in making our world a better place. And we're going to hear about the things that you did in the civil rights movement. But is there anything toward racial justice that you'd like to say in this moment?
Well, you know, I think all of us on this panel believe in protest. We cut our teeth demanding equal justice and fair play for all of us. But what happened in Washington was not that. It was something stirred up by the President of the United States based on lies. And people bought into those lies and sieged our Capitol, and people lost their lives in that. And the President of the United States must be blamed for that. And he must be punished in some way for that.
Thank you, Mr. Booker.
Can
Anyone
I
else?
chime in next?
Who is that?
Yes.
Bishop?
This is, yes.
Yes, Bishop, please.
I think the problem is that Donald Trump was elected the president and did not understand that we were not electing a king. He failed to realize that because he owned something, he didn't own America. He owned some company, he owned some real estate, and he was able to do whatever he wanted to do. He never worked with a council, he never had a board of directors, and besides that, he was a failure in most of his major events. He failed in the airline industry. He failed in the casino industry. He failed in trying to start a college. Donald Trump was a thief who learned how to count money. And there are people in our society who believe that if you can count money, you're smart. You can be a dumb person and count money. Donald Trump has brought this nation to a point where it was inconceivable that we would ever arrive at this point in our society. So let me just put it this way.
Okay.
You can be as Black as you want to be, but being Black does not make you dumb. Donald Trump failed to understand that because he was president, he could not ignore the Black community. And the other thing that he failed to realize, it was possible for somebody to lose, and he was a loser in the last election.
All right. Thank you very much.
May I just jump in on that for a second?
Yes, sir, Dr. Middlebrook.
I think also Donald Trump grabbed a hold of a deep-seated undercurrent in this country.
Yes.
That there were a large number of people in this country who were angry because of the election of Barack Obama.
Yes.
Who were angry because of the advances having been made by African Americans and Latinx, who were angry because of the LGBTQ community, who were just angry. And Donald Trump represented the voice of all of that element who rose together in an attempt to turn back the clock and reclaim America for the white is right, yellow is mellow, brown stick around, black get back. And there's an element that grabbed a hold of that. And so where we are now is we've got all of that force that's had that pent up emotion. Remember something, Martin King has been dead for 52 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they are coming forth now to express the same kinds of views that the Ku Klux Klan was expressing long before. And so what has had to happen is that view has been passed from one generation to another, and it's been seething. And he has merely given them the opportunity to express where they have been all along. And,
Right.
and that's why we're in the dilemma we're in.
All right.
Donald Trump he ran for re-election, what he achieved was re-impeachment. And that's quite a remarkable
Very profound.
thing to do. When I think in terms of this past election, and Donald Trump did one thing that America needed. He turned people out to the polls like never seen before last year. In 2016, too many people sat at home, sat on their hands, watching reruns of Good Times and not paying attention to what was going on and not understanding the threat that he posed to our democracy. No longer are people sitting at home. And there are folk like Stacey Abrams in Georgia, where Bishop Brown is, that really have learned, they've developed a playbook in terms of how to educate people on the need to register. But beyond that, not you don't just register, you have to get out and vote. She's put together an organization that knocks on doors, makes phone calls, really turns out the voters, and they outperformed African Americans in Georgia, outperformed the turnout that they did for Barack Obama in 2008. That playbook that she established is really transferable to a number of places. North Carolina comes to my mind because the demographics are very similar to what they are in Georgia. Texas is another one that that same playbook could be implemented in. And this might surprise some, but maybe not the folk on this panel, Mississippi, because Mississippi has the highest percentage of African American people of any state in the union. All you need to bring over is about 15% of the white voters, plus you add in the Latinx community and what Asians happen to be in Mississippi, and you have a threshold for being able to achieve what they did in Georgia. So,
All right.
Mr. Trump, bless his heart.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Can I add something, please?
Did more than what he set out to do. The biggest mistake to announce he was going to run for president.
Okay. Yeah. Let Mr. Glasgow jump in here.
I'd like to think that I was cautiously optimistic. And we all have our different fears. I have 4 things that have really scared me in my life. As a 14-year-old, when the U-2 pilot was shot down over Russia, I was afraid that the Russians were going to retaliate, especially with our proximity to Oak Ridge. Okay, then John F. Kennedy was killed. That turned out better than I thought, because LBJ was not the mean Southerner that I expected, but that was one of my fears. The other fear was when Dr. King died or was assassinated. But my latest fear is what happened with the attack on the Capitol. I'm not going to dwell on Donald Trump, but that scares me. When I said cautiously optimistic, there are 4 things. I mentioned 4 negatives, but there are 4 positive things that really touched me. One being the Civil Rights Act of '64, that helped a lot. The election of Barack Obama, that really lifted my spirits, gave me hope. And now the election of Vice President-elect Harris. And then, lo and behold, Georgia. I never thought I'd see that, and that gives me hope. But I'm not going to dwell on Trump, but I'm afraid, but I'm also optimistic. And that's it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for your candid conversation about that. This is a conversation about racial justice, and we've got to be able to express ourselves. So we're grateful that you did. So I want to take us back now, just before I turn it back over to our other panelists. My assignment is to take us back, and I just want to take us down memory lane. So I don't know. Let me start with this. Now it's interesting. because this picture is a picture. Well, let me stand over here, and maybe you can help me understand, because it looks like this handsome gentleman in the front with the hat on is the leader. So who is that handsome man that looks like the leader, well dressed with the briefcase and the sharp hat? Who is that in that picture?
That's me.
Bishop
I'm having.
Brown.
Look, Booker was part of pushing me out of there. My mother almost died that afternoon when that picture was printed in the newspaper.
Can you explain to us why you lead the parade? I don't know who the man is with that Phi Beta Sigma hat on, but I see that. But maybe you can help us understand.
Well, you see, it's who got off of the bus first. So I think I wasn't at the back of the bus. I was near the front of the bus. However we got down there, I just got off of the bus first, and I wanted to make sure we were not going to be sidetracked about where we were going. So I wasn't lit. It was a group photo now. Let's put it in perspective. This was a picture of the group, and I just happened to be out front. There's always somebody out front.
That's not what he told me, Mr. Booker. When he came out, and I took a picture of him standing, I said, so you were the leader. He said, I know it looks that way, doesn't it? Probably the best dressed. So let me start with you, Bishop. Tell me what was happening that day, what you were feeling, what you were thinking. Take me back to that picture.
Knoxville was a different place from much of the South. There was resistance. Nobody was rolling out the welcome mat to the various places that were serving food. But Booker and others, there were a lot of people, as you can see in this photo. We didn't have to decide what we were going to do. We were committed to doing something that was positive. I think Booker, in one of your books, you talk about a conversation that you had with the mayor, and he wanted to say to us, well, you know, this is not as bad as it appears to be. But we were not asking anybody. By our statement, we were telling people. And sometimes by what you do, you can make a louder statement by doing it than saying you're going to do it. And you see there are enough of us, and they weren't used to seeing that many Black folk at one time on Gay Street at the same time.
Mr. Booker, is that you, that handsome man behind the other handsome man with the hat on?
Don't let Harold Middlebrook know that's a Phi Beta Sigma cap. He might with his AKA button on. I mean, with his Alpha Phi Alpha button on there. I thought
you said the wrong AKA letter, but that's okay. I won't let you make that mistake.
Well, I do get my Greek mixed up from time to time. Say what, Al?
He's just being envious about A Phi A. He really wanted
I know Dr. King was A Phi A, and we all understand. We've been to that school of thought. No, the reason we were on Gay Street is quite interesting, because we had seen what the students were doing at A&T College in Greensboro, North Carolina, and we thought we ought to do the same thing. So we began to organize, but we had a couple of stumbling blocks. We knew that the merchants didn't want us to come to downtown Knoxville to demonstrate. And of course, we had the college people, the dean and the president, who were afraid of what might happen to us, what might happen to the campus. Would it be firebombed? Would the funds to the college dry up? So they called us to a meeting. You know, Warren, I don't know if you remember this or not, but they didn't hold the meeting in one of the classrooms or an auditorium. They took us to the basement of the faculty building where
Yes,
nobody could detect where we were.
yes.
And they took us down there and issued what I thought was a threat that we couldn't do it. So we threatened them back. We said, well, if you won't let us go, we'll write letters to Ebony and Jet and the Pittsburgh Courier and all the black press to let them know that Knoxville College won't allow us to participate. So those were a couple of the roadblocks, but the main roadblock was the older black people in Knoxville who said, you know, we've got good race relations here. We don't have to have demonstrations. We can negotiate this thing with the lunch counter operators. Of course, we didn't believe that, but we wanted to give them a chance to prove it. So time went on and nothing happened. So one day we decided we just walked through downtown Knoxville, walked through every place that had a lunch counter. So this is how this picture came about. We were smart enough to alert the media that we were going to do this. So the newspapers knew it, the TV stations knew it. So that's how that picture came about in the News Sentinel, because we had alerted them that this is what we were up to show that we meant business. The elders in the community might have thought they were negotiating, but we didn't. So this was to prove that we were serious about our efforts.
All right, let me see if I can grab another picture here. I'm gonna do this picture because if I can see it, it's probably one of my favorite pictures. Mr. Glasgow, can you tell me?
Okay,
Now, what is that picture? What's going on?
that's us at the Tennessee Theater. This was my third or second time picketing there or demonstrating. The first time, I guess, was a practice run. We
Well, first of all, where are you? So we see the three here. There's the
we are in front of the Tennessee Theater,
okay,
directly in front.
that's right. And so right here we see the gentleman, the young man with the hat on. What's his name?
That is James Gillingwaters.
All right, a handsome young man right beside him in the middle. What's his name?
That's me. That's me. I'm in the middle.
That's you in the middle, and then
And that's J.D. Daniels.
and that's J.D. Daniels. And you guys are picketing at the Tennessee Theater. And what are you holding in your hands?
Those are dollar bills.
All right.
What I was saying earlier was that the first time we marched up there, we marched for maybe 10, 15 minutes. And then we were told to leave. We didn't run, but we left. The second time I went up there, we were arrested because we didn't leave after 15 minutes. We were arrested for parading without a permit. And this particular day, we had a permit, so they couldn't just take us. So what we did was we were told to sit down, so that caused a disturbance. So they picked us up and they took us to jail, and later we were transferred to the juvenile facility.
Is this this picture here?
Now this is the last time I was up there. And this is, they had determined that there were some youth in the, I think the first time I went to jail, it was in a paddy wagon. But they determined that there were youth involved. So this time they loaded the juveniles into a police car until they had it full. And I don't know if you can tell, but I can see my friend James Gillingwaters in the middle with his hat on, and I'm next to him. And I think they made us, I think there were 4 in the back seat eventually, and I had to sit on top of two laps. Okay. The next picture, you're showing is also in front of the Tennessee Theater. And here we're holding hands and probably singing "We Shall Overcome." I don't know who the first two people are on the right, two young ladies. The young man is one of my classmates, Joe Mobley.
And that's the class of 1964?
Yes, but this was in '63. Okay, next is Jackie Gallman, Peggy Wiggins.
And I might just add, if we stop there with Jackie Gallman, I did talk to her. And if you're wondering why there aren't any females on here, because there were women obviously involved in the civil rights movement. And I have talked to all of those that I could. Thank you, Mr. Glasgow. And of course, Ms. Jackie Gallman is a very strong member of the Beck Center. And I did talk to her. She was unable to join us, but she did talk to us. So I have talked to several of these women and gotten their stories about what the experience was like. I'll share one story with you here in just a few minutes about one of the ladies, but I'll let you finish talking about some of these members as well.
Okay, on the other side of Jackie Gallman is Peggy Wiggins. And then I'm next, staring at the camera. Jewel, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna point. Go
Okay,
ahead.
Jewel Wilson is next. She was a high school classmate. I think the next person is Wilbur Burris, but I'm not sure. I know that the guy in the white shirt is James Valentine.
Jimmy.
And then there is James Gillingwaters with the cap on. I'm not sure who the young lady is, but the last fellow, his name was McDowell. I think it was Howard. But there we are singing in front of the Tennessee. And that was quite an experience.
And I tell you, this, if I can get this other picture I wanted to, sorry. I was trying to get the other angle of the Tennessee. The Tennessee Theater and those folks standing there, one of the folks I did talk to was Miss Upton. You remember Sylvia Upton? You may remember, you may not remember Mr. Glasgow, Mr. Booker, Dr. Middlebrook.
She was in my class at KC's.
Okay, she was in your class. So let me tell you what she said. So she was giving me some of the stories about the downtown thing. She said, you know, Mr. Booker was the leader. He was telling us, you know, what to do and how to do. And one of the things that she talked about with her story is their assignment was to go downtown and to, you know, and to try to buy a ticket. And when they go downtown to try to buy a ticket, the whole idea, I apologize, I'm sorry, I'm going back and forth. I was trying to scroll to get to a picture, but I'm not able to see it here. And when you get to the booth, and that's the picture I was looking for, Mr. Glasgow, you had a picture in front of the booth. Let me see if I can get that picture in front of the booth. Do you guys have that picture in front of the Tennessee Theater Discovery? Can you pull that up for me? It looks like the one that's on the screen now with a different angle. No worries if not. I was hoping to get that other image. Anyway, it was another image where you guys were standing in front of the ticket booth. And that particular image was interesting because one of the things that Miss Sylvia Upton said about Mr. Booker was, as the leader, they were supposed to go to the booth and ask to purchase a ticket. Well, what she told me was that everyone that was, all of the workers were instructed to say no. No matter what the students asked, no matter what happened, they were instructed to say no. So the students were to come up and buy a ticket and whatever, and they were supposed to hear the answer no. Under no circumstances was any employee from the theater to say anything other than the word no. So Miss Sylvia Upton, who was also part of the movement and was walking with them downtown, shared a story with me that she goes up to the booth to buy a ticket. And instead of asking to buy the ticket, she says, "Do you believe in God?" To the booth worker. And the booth worker sitting there like, no. She did not want to say no, but she had to. So immediately the police officer took Miss Sylvia over to Mr. Booker and said, "She's not asking the right question." And she was getting in trouble. So anyway, it was hard because the worker was told to say no. And when she was confronted with that question, which I thought was a really great question from Miss Sylvia, do you remember that, Mr. Booker?
No.
Well, that was a great question that she said. Now this one's cut off a little bit. Maybe you guys can help me in the back. There's a handsome, tall gentleman in this picture. Can you help me in the back room? Do you have this picture? Who is this in this picture, Dr. Middlebrook?
That was a young fellow standing to the right.
Pretty handsome. Who is that?
I think they said his name was Harold Middlebrook.
The
person,
like Shirley Chisholm too.
That the person standing to the right was not the important person. The one in the middle, the lady, was Shirley Chisholm.
Yeah.
Who was the first African-American congresswoman to dare run for president of the United States for the nomination. And she was a fiery lady. That picture was made at the Peabody Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee. And she came to our city. I had the privilege of presenting her and being her escort while she was in the city. And I think one of the things that was always interesting to me was she always wore her gloves wherever she went, but she had the audacity to really speak up and speak out. And she was very keen with it. And one or two people tried to challenge her, but I think when she finished, they were sorry they challenged her. Yes.
Awesome. What year is that?
Oh, I've got to go back now and count. Just give me a minute. The picture you have up now, we had an election going on in Memphis. A.W. Willis, an attorney, was running for the mayor of the city. But Bill Lucy, who was the international treasurer of AFSCME, H. Ralph Jackson, and the lady is a little lady from Mississippi, Fannie Lou Hamer. And she came to town, one, to support the sanitation workers, but more importantly, to support A.W. Willis as he was running for mayor of the city of Memphis. And the last fellow who's standing on the right was one of the campaign workers for A.W. Willis at the same time that he was involved in the sanitation strike.
It's interesting that A.W. Willis was the first Black person elected to the state legislature in 1964, the first one since Reconstruction.
That's right. Following him was his law partner, Russell Sugarman.
Russell Sugarman.
Yeah. Can I just tell you an interesting story about that? Russell Sugarman, A.W. Willis, and Ben Hooks were all law partners. They were in the same building. Ben Hooks' office was in the middle. A.W. and Russell's offices were both on the outside. They were both Democrats. And at that time, Ben Hooks was a Republican. And John Kennedy was and the Democratic Party was in power. And Ben always felt left out. He would joke and cry, he said, because they would get invitations to Washington, but he got invitations to nowhere. But they were partners, and they did the work together in Memphis to provide the legal basis and to be. Ben Hooks at that same time did in fact run for juvenile court judge. And so it was unique during those days. That young fella had been during the time when AW was running and all of the, when Russell was running the first time, was president of the Youth Volunteers. And we were out knocking on doors, trying to get people to register to vote and to try to turn out a large voter turnout to try to get the first Black mayor of Memphis.
Going back to the Tennessee Theater, one evening downtown on Gay Street, we were marching, going up to the window and asking to purchase a ticket, being told no. And white people who were behind us that were part of the demonstration, when the woman in the little booth would turn to them, they said, well, he was here first. There were cops down there, and they were, by their countenance, very hostile to what we were there doing. And we started singing freedom songs. Officer Jones loves freedom. Officer Jones loves freedom. Officer Jones loves freedom, freedom, freedom. Well, there was one cop named Scruggs. And when we started to sing about him and call his name, he broke out in the biggest old redneck grin that you've ever seen. And there was a young white guy, counter protester, who was down there raising trouble, talking, calling names and what have you. That's when Scruggs' jaw went tight. And he grabbed this young fellow and rushed him around the corner on Clinch Street, right around the corner from Tennessee Theater. They were gone for about 10 minutes. And when this young fellow showed up again, he had blood dripping down from the corner of his mouth. Scruggs took him around the corner and tuned him up, and he left the scene. So when I got on the city council, I tried to get Scruggs promoted, but he was so disliked within the police department, I couldn't do anything for him, but I did get his son promoted.
Wow.
One of the things that that interests me is the struggle that went on in Knoxville at the Tennessee Theater. We had back in 1960, we had a little different situation in Atlanta. When we went to the theaters to try to buy a ticket, of course, they would not sell us a ticket. But there were some students from Morehouse who were from Nigeria and Ghana. And they would go to the theater and put on their native regalia, their native garb, and go back and be able to buy a ticket, which was an interesting thing to me, that because of who they were and how they were dressed, they were able then in Atlanta to get a ticket and we couldn't.
Wow.
I'm aware of two cousins here in Knoxville who pulled that at the Tennessee Theater. One was very dark skinned. She dressed up in some robes, and her cousin, who was light complexion, would act as her.
I think we might have lost Mr. Robinson, so we'll come back to him. His screen seems to be frozen a little bit. So I'll put this picture up, which is another one of my favorite pictures. Maybe Mr. Booker, you can tell us a little bit about this picture.
Well, this is one of my favorite pictures. I'm a jailbird, and I really, really like it. We were marching around in front of one of the downtown theaters, whether it was the Tennessee or the Riviera, and I decided to get out of the picketing part of it and walked up to the window and asked for a ticket. But the ticket seller backed out of the booth and left me standing there, so I just stood. And a city policeman who was watching me came up and said, "You're going to have to move on." And I said, "Well, when I get my ticket, I'm going to move on into the theater." He said, "No, you have to move on." I said, "Well, when she sells me a ticket, I'm going to move on into the theater." He got tired of that. So he said, "Come on, go with me." So I was placed under arrest, and he walked me down Gay Street and called the wagon. That's the dean of men at Knoxville College, John Bell, who came to get us out of jail, and we refused to go. But I was put in the wagon, and I got this great lecture from the wagon driver. He said, "I don't know what's wrong with you colored people. You got the gym theater down there at the corner of Vine and Central. You're coming up here on Gay Street, stirring things up. It's just communism, and you are nothing but a communist dupe. So he was giving me this great lecture as we went on down Gay Street. He spotted a drunk rolling a barrel across the street, and he stopped and arrested the man. And he opens the back of the wagon to put him in. I said, "Hey, you can't put that white man in here with me." He said, "Oh, we don't discriminate in here, buddy," and took us both on to jail. There were many times, I had some levity to use because it was a very serious situation. It could have been a dangerous one, but there was always a chance to laugh about how stupid it was.
Yeah.
I had another experience with the Riviera Theater. I have two younger brothers. One is 12 years my junior, the other is 13 years my junior. And in 62, 63, somewhere along in there, Riviera was advertising a movie called Jason and the Argonauts. Well, one of my brothers really wanted to see this, and he was, I don't know, I guess he was about 9 or 10 years old. And he wanted me to take them down to the Riviera to see the movie. And I had to sit down and explain to them why they couldn't go. And that was hard.
Well, while I've got you talking, you froze up a few minutes ago, and I'm sorry, but there is a picture on the screen right now. It's a little hard to see because it's blown up large, but there is a picture of a gentleman in the back in the white shirt here. The head's cut off just a little bit. Can you tell us about this picture?
Well, Theonis
Yeah.
can tell you about that. That's Charles Blair, and they desegregated the university. Theonis can do that one better than I.
Yes. In July of 1960, the Associated Council for Full Citizenship, which was sponsoring the sit-in demonstrations, took out an ad in a Sunday News Sentinel that listed a number of things that were wrong in Knoxville. This book, I don't know if you can see that on your screen, Diary of a Sit-In by Merrill Proudfoot. And in that ad, it lists a number of things that were wrong in Knoxville, but one of those was the fact that the University of Tennessee's undergraduate school did not accept Black students. I was involved in the lunch counter sit-ins. My parents had been involved in the lunch counter sit-ins as well. And so that Sunday night when that ad came out in the paper and I read it, I sat down and wrote a letter of application to the university to apply for admission. I didn't mention race. I did not mention what high school I had graduated from, which of course was Austin, and the city schools were segregated. Our mailing address was about 3 blocks from East High, but we lived about a mile from Austin High. I took it down and dropped it in the post office. A few days later, I got a letter back saying, "We're sorry, but we don't accept, quote, Negroes in the undergraduate school." So I wrote a subsequent letter. Ultimately, my parents and I went over and met with the deans of admissions for both the undergraduate school and the graduate school. The gentleman you see in that picture is Bill Smythe, who was the dean of undergraduate admissions. We eventually ended up meeting with Dr. Andy Holt, who was president of the university. He wanted to know why I wanted to come to UT. I laid out the fact that I was a Tennessean by birth. I paid taxes and my parents did. Every time we bought anything at the grocery store, it had sales tax on it, which was funding the university. And I had a right to come to UT. He said that wanted to know if I wanted him to take the matter to the Board of Trustees because only they could change the policy. And I said, certainly. And he said, well, but I can't guarantee what they will do. I said, I understand that, but you and the board needs to understand that if you don't change the policy, I plan to sue the university. They met in November of 1960, brought the state attorney general in, asked him if he could win such a lawsuit. He told them that he could not, given all the case law that was being established across the South in higher education. So they voted, changed the policy, and I was admitted. And this was enrollment date, January 4th, 1961, when Charles and I enrolled, and Mrs. Glisby also enrolled, but I never saw a picture of her.
Right. Well, thank you very much. So integrating the schools. We've got some more pictures I want to show up, but I want to turn it back over. But just before I do, for those of you who are are watching and who are a part of this town hall that are out there listening, I see there is a question in the chat room. Let me invite you, if you would like to, you are welcome to submit a question to the panel, and we will look through those questions and try to get those through. Our time is going to go really quickly, and so we understand that, but please, we want you to join with us. So if you do have a question, please place it over in the Q&A, and we will be answering questions as we go. But now I want to turn it over to Jacqueline and to Davion and let them pick up some questions, and then we'll come back with some more pictures as well.
Okay, so the first question is, who or what influenced you to be a part of the civil rights movement?
Well, speaking for myself, I had spent 3 years in the Army. I was in France and England. I left Knoxville when I was 19 years old, and all I knew was segregation, riding the back of the bus, separate water fountains, couldn't eat at the downtown lunch counter in the main lunchroom, separate schools, everything segregated. When I got to France and England, everything was integrated or desegregated. I could go to any movie, eat in at any restaurant, do anything I wanted to do. For 3 years, I was free. But when I came back to Knoxville in May of 1957, I was back to square one. Everything in Knoxville was still segregated. So when we saw what was going on in Greensboro with those students at A&T, we decided this was our chance. At least we had the price of a hamburger. We had the price of a movie ticket. So let's go into downtown Knoxville and demand our civil rights. So that was how I got involved with it.
I grew up in a church where the pastor preached every Sunday, God's going to send us a Moses. God's going to deliver us from all that we're going through. And my grandparents were very strange. Every morning, they would read the newspaper at breakfast time, and they would talk about issues that were in the paper. In Memphis, if there was a car wreck and one was a white woman and the other an African American, the white woman's name was listed as Mrs. The African American woman's name was just listed. And my granddaddy had to have him a little gin in his coffee in the morning. And he would curse and say, God is going to straighten this mess out. Well, then men like Lieutenant George Lee and Ben Hooks and others came along involved in the struggle. And I saw them. We had a principal named Blair T. Hunt. And all of these men inspired me to really work to believe. And then when we heard about Dr. King and all, I didn't ever think about trying to be no leader. I just wanted to be a good worker. In the 10th grade, we were working young people to get people registered. We couldn't vote because you had to be 21, but we were working to get people registered to vote, young people in Memphis, because we believed that there was a change coming. And so I think a number of people and a number of situations kind of helped to mold me and shape me to get me ready for the struggle.
Mine is not unlike Reverend Middlebrook. I had a 5th grade teacher, Miss Drake, who drilled into her students that what the United States was supposed to be about,
Yes.
and how far short we were falling from that. And she had a song that we had to sing practically every day, "We Are American Too." One line in there was that from Bunker Hill to the Rhine, we've been right there in line. We are Americans too. Then Dr. King came on the scene in Selma, and the bus boycott, which spurred my imagination in terms of what it could be. In the fall of 1959, the Knoxville NAACP organized a group of 17 of us to go and challenge the enrollment policies in Knoxville city schools. Some of us went to East High, some went to junior high schools, and some went to elementary schools, Subsequently, we were, of course, turned away and a lawsuit was filed, and that got me started. Then in the spring of 1960, when the lunch counter sit-ins were going on across Nashville at that point, they'd already started in Greensboro, North Carolina. There was a student from Knoxville College who came to Austin High to address the student body to inform us of what was going on. And our principal, Mr. O.T. Hogue, allowed this speaker to come in and tell us what was going on. And that speaker was a fellow named Bob Booker, which inspired all of us. And when the lunch counter sit-ins started in June, after bad faith negotiations that had occurred with these lunch counter stores, and we all just filled in.
All right.
I got involved because I was really tired of being treated like a second-class citizen. We could load trucks, we couldn't drive them. We could cook the food, but we couldn't eat it. We could ride on the bus, but we couldn't drive it. I could go in blue circle, but I couldn't sit down. And besides, the gym theater stunk. So I got involved because I wanted to improve our lot, and I felt by getting into the movement that things would improve.
And I know, Mr. Glasgow, that my young people are doing the question, but can you tell us how old you were? In fact, when this picture is shot and you guys are, again, I love this picture where you're sitting there. Let's see if I can grab that. Can you just tell us how old you were at that moment?
I was 16.
There you go. All right. Bishop?
I'm sorry.
No.
No, we were in a kind of unique situation. In Knoxville, in North Carolina, much of the initial movement was around lunch counters. The advisors, Maxine Smith and others who were with the NAACP in Memphis, our struggle started out with libraries. The students at Lemoyne College were going to sit in at the library, and I was still in high school, senior in high school, president of the student council, and I don't know how I ended up with all of the college students, but they took us to the libraries, and as each car dropped us off, unbeknownst to us, the paddy wagon was already out behind the library waiting on us. And everybody else went to jail, but I had to go to juvenile. They got out on bond on a Saturday night. I couldn't get out till Monday. But our campaign started around libraries and around learning rather than around the lunch counters and the buses.
Wow. Interesting.
I grew up in East Knoxville on Vine Street, and we had white neighbors on either side. There was a gas station just a block from where we lived, owned by a guy that I simply remember his name is Mr. Ray. Across from the old Austin was a grocery store, and his name was Benjamin. I don't remember his first to last name. But I want to give you those circumstances, and my grandmother, you could not tell my grandmother from a white person. So we were able to ride whatever bus we wanted to ride as long as we were with my grandmother. And my grandmother would say to us, get on the bus and don't say anything to me. And the bus drivers, when they picked us up, when we got to our house on Vine Street, he would say, oh, isn't that so nice? You're kind of little knitter boys downtown. She'd say, yes, gonna get them some shoes today. So the humor for us was that my grandmother was outsmarting them, and my grandmother didn't work. She'd sit on the front porch and rock. So when the bus went by my house, they waved at her. So the irony of it was they had to know where she lived because they saw we lived in the same house. I could never figure out how they could wave at her, see us playing in the yard. And if we were by ourselves, go to the back of the bus, we were my grandmother, they would say to my grandma, well, since you're kind of today, you just sit right up here with your grandmother, right up here in the front. So the irony of it is that certain people of certain hue didn't want to be like us, but many of us look like them because their ancestors had been messing around, simply put it. And many of our foreparents learned how to do that blend between being very dark and very white. So I didn't have that kind of experience, but we learned our place. And we were told, stay in your place. And eventually, as I got older, I didn't want to stay in my place.
Mhm.
I refused to allow white people or the society to dictate for me what my place was going to be. And from our church and her and our pastors talking about civil rights, Middlebrook and others, you guys we were hearing what you were doing, and the doors started to open in Knoxville.
Well, I'm going to ask our, if everybody's answered that question, if my co-host panelists, my co-host will maybe check out the chat room, see if there's some questions from our community that one would like to ask, either you, Jacqueline, or if you would like to, Davian, choose a question from the community.
Somebody in the chat asked, how do you feel about the first female and Black vice president?
I feel like she'll be the next president following Biden. That's one thing I feel about her.
I feel that she's going to be a very capable, but she is already a very capable person. She has demonstrated leadership in the state of California by her legal position. And then she's going to do all right. She's going to do us proud.
I'm elated, overjoyed, grateful, and I believe she's going to really make this president-elect is giving her an opportunity also to be a teammate.
Yes.
Rather than just a vice president. She is actually in the process of making the decisions, making the choices, setting the platform. And so I think that she is going to, in fact, be an excellent vice president, which will make her ready whenever the time comes for her to step into the slot as president. I'm just glad.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got.
I knew you'd like this, Reverend Kessler. Isn't it interesting that the first female is also an African American? And for your benefit and others, you know, she's a graduate of a historical Black college, and that really makes us happy.
Yeah, she's a member of the Divine Nine. That makes me happy too. So we're all.
You're not gonna say which one, are you?
We'll leave it right there. Suffice it to say, Mr. Glasgow, I want to go back because there's a couple questions in here, and I wanted to pick up something a picture that I didn't show, and then Middlebrook, I've got some pictures I want to ask you about. But there's a question about Mr. Glasgow about, and maybe any of those, once you were able to buy a ticket to the Tennessee Theater, do you remember that experience? Do any of you guys remembering what happened when you were able to finally buy a ticket to the Tennessee Theater?
I didn't hear the entire question.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, and anyone's welcome to ask, do you remember when you were able to buy a ticket to the Tennessee Theater?
Okay, I do. Before I left Knoxville to join the Navy, I was able to go to the Tennessee Theater and to the BSU.
Mm-hmm.
And I had I'll just do this. I had a little photograph that a classmate of mine took There's a picture of us demonstrating. I hope you can show it later on. But this was my most prized possession for like 35 years. This is the only proof that I had that I participated. And I had stapled a ticket stub on the back of it. Yeah, there it is.
And
Mhm.
picture,
Thank
right?
you.
That's the
So here we are at the Tennessee. James Gillenwaters and no, we've seen this picture. There was another one I wanted to see.
It's okay. You want to see what was on the back of that picture?
No, yeah, but that's the stub, and the cost was 75 cents. And so I had $1 out on the other picture, and I was going to get change back.
Well, that's 3 times the price of a ticket at the gym theater.
Yes, indeed.
That's right.
Anybody else remember going to the Tennessee Theater when you finally could buy a ticket?
I
Yes.
remember I remember when I first went, there were just 3 or 4 of us. I don't remember why it was such a small crowd, but we had no trouble once they sold us a ticket and there was no opposition. We just went on in.
First time I went there was with in that line that Mr. Glasgow talked about where he was identifying people. He mentioned James Valentine or Jimmy Valentine.
Mm-hmm.
His brother, Michael Valentine, and I went to the Tennessee Theater. That was just like Bishop Brown just said, there was no anything about it. They just simply sold us our tickets. We went in, looked at the splendor of that theater and watched the movie and left and went home.
Yeah.
But I do recall that on one episode of Stand-Ins at the Tennessee Theater, they were playing To Kill a Mockingbird while they returned us away at the booth.
Yeah. Booker could not have watched that movie. He would have been a rebel.
No, I was in Chattanooga at the time. I had graduated from Knoxville College the fall of '62. And I didn't come back to Knoxville for recreation purposes until summer of 1964. So the theater was well desegregated by then, as well as the hospitals. I need to mention that too, because prior to that summer when things began to desegregate, if a Black person became ill and had to be hospitalized, he was admitted only to a portion of the 3rd floor at UT Hospital.
That's right.
But that summer, UT Hospital desegregated, St. Mary's, Baptist, and Fort Sanders all did. You know, I often tell the story, and this could very well be true. If a Black person were crossing Blunt Avenue and got hit by a car in front of Baptist Hospital, the ambulance would have to take him to UT Hospital. He couldn't be treated at Baptist. So it was that kind of foolish situation. And, you know, we've heard of those things through the years, like Bessie Smith, the famous blues singer, for example, who was in a car wreck and couldn't be admitted to a white hospital and she died. And we've heard that quite often. Whether or not that would have happened in Knoxville, I don't know, but I suspect that it would have. That Baptist wouldn't have taken me in as a critically injured patient.
In Memphis, we had a couple of, the funeral homes actually served as the ambulances for us. They had a light on the top, but you had 2 ambulance companies. One of them was Medic and the other was Jack Ruby. One of the problems was all the time that Jack Ruby's kept having wrecks while they were carrying people to the hospital, but they would not carry a Black. If you got hurt, Medic or Ruby would not carry you. One of the local funeral homes would have to send an ambulance, which, you know, doubled also as a hearse to carry you to the hospital.
In case you didn't make it, you're already here.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting here.
The irony of Knoxville's situation as far as hospitals was that St. Mary's was Catholic, Fort Sanders was associated with the Presbyterian Church, and Baptist stood, that name stands for itself, 3 church-related
Yep.
hospitals, none of which practice Christian brethren.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
You're talking about those ambulances. Here in Knoxville, the Wheeler Mortuary had an ambulance. It was an antique creature. I don't know what kind of machine that was, but you could hear it screaming for 8 or 10 blocks away until it got to you.
Oh, that's great. Well, I think some of our young people. So Jacqueline, do you have another question you want to ask our panel?
Yes. What advice would you give to a young and up-and-coming activist?
Be just that, be a young activist. Educate yourself in terms of the history of the civil rights movement. Follow your mind and to understand what's right and what's wrong, and not be afraid to stand up and speak out and challenge the status quo when you see these things that are unjust within our society. Organize yourselves, carry on the fight.
Study the issues. Study the issues so that you are able to articulate your desires and your aspirations and the cause for which you struggle and fight. One of the things you don't want to do is get out there in the struggle and people ask you, why are you out here? And all you can say is, oh, I think I'm supposed to be out here. Know what the issues are, know what the cause is about.
Let me say amen to what Dr. Middlebrook just stated. That is so very, very important. I cringe when frankly, some of our athletes are interviewed.
Yes.
I cringe that they cannot speak the language, English language. You have to have a good self-image in order to be a mover and a shaker. Now, you may shake it because you've got some dollars, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be a permanent shaker. So to the young lady who asked the question, I think you have to have a vision about what you want to be and where you want to go.
Yes.
And how you plan to get there. Now, you may not know every step, but take the first step. And if you take the first one, you'll figure out how to take the second one and on until you reach where you want to be. You know,
I got a phone. Yeah, I got a phone call yesterday that was quite interesting. This gentleman said to me, Mr. Booker, I read your column. I have a lot of respect for you. Would you please write a particular column for me? I said, what is it? He said, would you write and ask these young these women at UT who take a knee when the national anthem is being played, tell them how wrong it is? I said, well, you know, after I give you my answer, you're not going to like me a lot either, because I agree with those young ladies. They have a right to do that. They should do that. They are going into a world where blacks are pulled over by cops all the time. Many of those blacks are millionaires many times over. They can drive a fancy car if they want to, but the cops pulled them over because they think or maybe feel they're profiling them as drug dealers. So these young ladies are protesting those evils in our society, and I'm with them. He said, oh, if you put it, oh, I don't dislike you. Oh, I still like you. I'll still read your stuff. But I had to inform him that that's why they're doing it. It funnels me that people don't understand why people are taking a knee. I don't understand that. And Theonis, you know, I don't know what the English teachers at UT think. Bishop Brown made a reference a while ago to some of our athletes who don't express themselves too well, even though they've been to college. But sometimes people on the staff at university don't express themselves. Did I say what I needed to say?
They're not this one, so we're okay. No.
Let me follow up on what Bob just said and what Bishop Brown also said. When I enrolled at UT, I looked at my courses that I had to take, and I had to take English. They arranged for me to meet with the dean of the liberal arts college, or the department head in the English department. I don't remember which. And I wanted to know, why did I need to take English? That's the only language I spoke. I've studied it for 12 years in school. I know how to read, I know how to write. And he gave me an answer that I have never forgotten. He told me that you could sit and have the greatest thoughts that have ever been thought of in the world. But if you did not know how to communicate those thoughts and those ideas to others, what good were they?
Yeah.
That's
And I'm
right.
taking that lesson.
All right, Mr. Glasgow, you want to finish this one up?
Okay, I was so involved with what they were saying. I don't know. I guess to me, I just think the youth need to know where they want to go, how to get there. When they get there, just pull someone up from behind you. Just help another brother. That's all.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
John, did you have some other questions you want to ask?
Yes. How would you describe the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.?
Dr. King was such an unusual person. His personality was beyond his presence. One of the things that you have to learn in life is not only develop a personality, but develop a presence. Because your presence can open a door that maybe your personality will not open the door. Dr. King not only had a presence and a personality, but he was connected on the inside, and he was spiritually connected to God, that you might well expect me to say as a Methodist bishop. But it is so important for us as we struggle through today's society to be aware of who we are, what we're about, and to have a roadmap as to how we might conceivably get there. And then when we get there, we can't turn our backs on anybody who's left behind. We're duty bound to do what King did. Just stay there, opening doors, preaching and encouraging others to get on board. And I think all of us who are on this panel have a degree of success in what we've been or what we're doing. And I hope that we can be good examples, Dr. Kessler, for all of us, for the Beck Center. There's hope. And Dr. King's death still not, it's so amazing to me that he's been dead 50 plus years and still has a presence.
Dr. Middlebrook, thank you so much, Bishop. So the picture, Bishop was just talking about Dr. King, and this would be the day. Pastor, would you join in and talk about this picture we're looking at?
Yes. That picture was made in Memphis in March of 1968. Dr. King had just taken a stand on the war in Vietnam, and that the United States could not continue to be involved in killing and be the moral leader that it was said to be. And he had turned the government and a number of other people against him. He had said, they were saying to him that you need to stick to the pulpit and preaching and stick to civil rights marching, and you don't have anything to do with the world issue. Martin King, to me, left us a legacy. Martin was a philosopher, a theologian, an orator. We could sit in the room and Dr. King could throw an issue out, and we would all be discussing that issue, and expressing our views. And Dr. King would just kind of spur the discussion on. And then when he would come out to make a speech, he had taken all that had been said and gelled it and refined it so that he spoke the issues and the desires and aspirations of the masses of people. We would be sitting in that mass meeting listening to him, and somebody would say, that sounds like Wyatt Walker. No, that's CTV. No, Middlebrook does that. No, Bevel, that's you. And because Martin was able to take all of our thoughts, our frustrations, our desires, our aspirations, and mold them into a philosophy and a program and a plan that would help people to feel good about themselves, even when they came to that meeting feeling depressed and down. And I think the one thing that Martin left for us was the ability to articulate those desires and aspirations. And it is my hope that as young people come along now and as our future leaders and our current leaders take up the battle, that you would, number one, listen to the views and of those who are expressing them, because everybody has a view.
Now you're in, I can't, this picture is cutting off a little bit, but there is a handsome Dr. Middlebrook in this picture. So I'm sorry that it's cutting off a little bit. Rodney, if you get a chance.
I think it showed it a little earlier. They cropped it down.
There, and I want to make sure everybody sees it. So I'm going to leave that up. There's Dr. Middlebrook there. You want to point out there on the side there.
Yes, I'm standing next to H.Ralph Jackson. Martin King is at the mic. Right behind him is Ralph Abernathy, Jesse Jackson, Jesse Epps. To Dr. King's left is Bernard Lee. Henry Starks is there. We've all just come out of a dialogue session and a conference where we have been discussing the position of SCLC on the Vietnam War. And it is at that point that he makes his statement that raises the ire of Lyndon Baines Johnson and everybody else in the country that thought they were somebody.
Thank you, Rocky. I appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Middlebrook. I wanted to make sure to keep that picture up, make sure everybody can see you there as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else on the question about Dr. King? If not, we've got several other questions, and I know we're about to run out of time. So if Jacqueline or if Davion would like to grab a question off the chat, because we've got lots of questions over in the chat.
Yes, sorry. One question reads, what is one word or words of advice that you would give to someone today who may feel like we will never overcome? What has helped you endure?
Bishop, if you will allow me, and I give respect and honor to your position, Bishop, and the representative of the Freedom Church. But years ago, before the labor movement picked it up, before the civil rights movement picked it up, there was a song that they used to sing in the old black church. I'll overcome. Yes. I'll overcome someday. If in my heart I do not yield, I'll overcome someday. The labor movement took it, and then the civil rights movement, and they said, we shall overcome.
Yes.
But anybody who gets too frustrated, it might look dark, but let the preacher in me say, look beyond the clouds, the sun is still shining. What helped me one time is Dr. King sent me to New York to stand in, and the plane, we got to Charlotte, and we had to change planes back then, and they said that we couldn't take off because the ceiling was too low. And I read the scripture, I read the 24 Psalms, and after a while that plane took off, and it was so dark that you couldn't hardly see inside the plane. They turned the lights up bright. But the plane kept climbing, kept climbing, kept climbing. And I looked out the window and I saw the sun shining. No matter how dark it gets now, the sun is still shining. And if you just got the faith to keep on saying, we shall overcome because God is on our side.
Let me say amen. Let me say preach.
We're about to run out of time, Mr. Glasgow. Got a whole bunch of preachers on here.
Oh, that is so important.
There's another question. It says, have we as a country ever gotten to what the country we were supposed to be? What does that truly look like in the world of destruction and racism post Martin Luther King Jr.?
Can I take a stab at that?
Yes, sir.
Society has never leveled off. Society is constantly, it has always been changing. It changes its mores, it changes its attitude. It changes, we change what we eat. We change what is good for us, what is bad for us. We change what's acceptable in social relationships. So society is not stagnant. And so our world, 50 years from today, the things that we think are good for us, they'll say, well, why would they do those dumb things like that? And we're looking backwards and saying, well, why did they accept those degrading restrictions? So there is hope. And the hope is the fact that society is never stagnant. It's always moving. And that's the way God is. God is not a stagnant God. And what has been will always be as far as God is concerned. And what we've learned as a people, as a Black people, and what the Beck Center is about is that where we have been is not a limitation to where we shall go.
Hallelujah.
And as long as we're moving, we're all right.
I heard a young man who is originally from here, William Terry Ladd, who pastors in Chattanooga. And Terry Ladd preached a sermon here a couple of years ago. And the title of the sermon was, "Your condition does not have to be your conclusion."
Oh, hallelujah, that's right.
Where you are now does not determine where you're going to be. And so the country is constantly changing, as Bishop has said. And you can't give up hope. Always know that tomorrow there's another opportunity to continue the struggle.
That's true. Amen.
One that guides me and has always guided me is in the founding documents of this nation, where they state, in order to create a more perfect union.
Yes.
We have never reached that more perfect union, but we're always in the process of striving to create that more perfect union.
That's it.
So the work continues. It's like being a Christian. You have to,
I think we
you
lost.
don't just, at the point when you get back to,
So I think he went out again. Mr. Booker, you want to comment on that?
No, it's all well said.
All well said. All right, Mr. Glasgow.
Just one other thing. I think our future is going to depend on our youth. There's been a projection that says the median Black wealth by the year 2053 is going to be zero. I can quote the source, but I think we as a people need to spend less and save more. We can't keep spending everything. That's all.
I want to talk about, just real brief, because we're about to run out of time, but it was a real important resolution that was passed here in Knoxville. Vice Mayor Gwen McKenzie proposed the resolution that was put forward. Knoxville, from its beginning of its history, has always taunted that we are the city with great race relations. Knoxville doesn't have a race problem. So just before I get to, before we ask the question about how we feel about this whole idea of reparations or restitution for many of the ills of the past, and particularly for those of you who are here in Knoxville and understand that resolution that Vice Mayor Gwen and would like to comment on that, Mackenzie put forth, I wanted to ask about, Mr. Glasgow, you had a situation, you were involved in Knoxville when, and Mr. Booker, you'll remember this too, when Knoxville was being rated as one of the best cities. You want to tell us about that in the 60s?
Yes, in 1963, Look magazine voted Knoxville as an All-American city. And I guess it was, if you were white. They had a big celebration at the Civic Coliseum. And I mean, there were news people everywhere. And we went down there and protested, but they couldn't understand why we were protesting. They said, the Coliseum is not, it's not segregated. But we were just trying to tell people, I realized that Knoxville was not as bad as Birmingham or Atlanta. My people came from South Carolina and Georgia to get a better life. They moved to Knoxville. But Knoxville was not an All-American city.
Mr. Booker?
Well, I wasn't here at that time. I know about it, but I wasn't in the city at that time.
When I talked about where Knoxville was getting an award, do you remember? Oh, you weren't here. You were.
Yes, I was here.
I was in Chattanooga at the time.
Okay, gotcha.
I was here. I was here.
Okay.
And we formed that march at Shiloh Presbyterian Church, which sat at the top of Church Street Hill, where the safety building is now. I was 7th in the line, and we spaced the line out. We marched about 10 feet apart with about 50 marchers, but stretching the line out, it made it look like we were more than what we were. My sign said 25 hospital beds for 25,000 Negroes in All-American City. Got to the bottom of the hill and the police took my sign, told me that I was under arrest. People at that time, where the parking lots, or now those parking garages are across the street from the auditorium, those were houses back then. The late Avon Rollins lived right across the street. And I remember one lady, blanking on her name right now, she worked at Cal Johnson Recreation Center. A lot of people started pouring out of their houses when they saw this, because those were all, that was in the middle of a Black neighborhood. They started pouring out of their houses to see what was going on. And when they saw that we were being arrested, this lady,
one lady, Theodis, was Willie C. Lewis.
That's who I'm talking about.
He said, leave those children alone. Leave those babies alone.
They went across the street and arrested her.
They arrested her, that's right.
Another one that they went across the street to get, and he was not a part of the demonstration, was Marion Barry. But he was known to the police as a troublemaker. And when they saw him in the crowd, he had to go to jail too.
So was Avon there during this time?
I don't recall Avon being there. He may have been.
I think so.
There were 3 or 4 children of police officers who got arrested that night too. Matter of fact, Avon was there. I remember that.
Yes, it was, yes.
Bishop, do you remember that?
No, I think I'd already gone to Atlanta by then, but I do wanted to say before we close, it just occurs to me, the things that we've talked about were past issues. Nobody's demonstrating now to buy a ticket to a theater. Many theaters have closed. Nobody's demonstrating to get into a fast food place. Many of those have gone out of business. And so it proves that the society is always changing. Our goals have to keep rising. It would have been unthinkable when we were demonstrating to get into a theater that 50 or 60 years later, we'd have a Black president. It would have been, we weren't even thinking about a Black president. We were demonstrating to get a sandwich at a lunch counter, and most of those lunch counters have gone out of business. So society is never stagnant. And so our young people must know that whatever they're facing now is not the standard. There's always going to be and ought to be and has to be a higher evolving standard. And the one thing I really want to drive home in this hour today, don't accept today's standard as the achievement.
Yeah.
Wherever we are today, we've got to be a higher achievers in future generations. These young people will look back at what we are proud of now and say, those old folks, what were they talking about? Why were they having that discussion on about what used to be 50 years ago? And why the Booker show in his book a picture in front of Willis, Undertaker, 5 or 6 old raggedy cars sitting out there in front with one light on top of them? And why were we writing about the bottoms? And why were we talking about the other kinds of things and the one floor that we could go to at the University of Tennessee? I had to get a tooth pulled, and that's where I had to go because Dr. Kern said, I don't want to do this in my office. And when I got there, I had to wait because there was no bed. So that's not the first time we had to wait for a bed for a hospital. It's not today's society. Society has to always be changing. And what we're doing is to make that change possible. Our generation, this current generation, has to sow the seed for forthcoming generations, and they'll come up with some new technology, a new way of travel, a new way of dressing, a new way of achieving, and they'll look back and say, man, why did they waste their time demonstrating to get into a theater that's already closed now?
Well, one thing I'd like to add to that discussion, and this is directed to the young people. All of us older heads stood on the shoulders of people who came.
That's
before.
right.
Yes.
We walked
That's right.
in the steps of people who tread that path before we did. I know
Yeah.
I did. I know Reverend Middlebrook did. Bishop
I did.
Booker, we all did. But to the young people, as you think about your lives, think about what the footsteps will be that you leave behind by the time you reach the age of us. What would be the shoulders that you develop that others who come after you will stand upon to take that next leap? We have to think forward. Chinese, they don't, here in the United States, we often think in terms of 6 months, maybe a year. The Chinese think in terms of 100 years to 1,000 years. That's the mentality that we need to develop. What's going to be those footsteps that we leave behind? What are going to be those shoulders for the generation?
Absolutely right.
May I add to that? Any people who don't know where you've been can't appreciate where you are and have no sense of direction for where you're going.
That's right.
If you don't appreciate where you've been, you're confused about what's happening now. And if you get where you think you want to go, you won't know that you're there. Make sure that you keep your feet grounded in your historical heritage, because those folk who suffered and struggled helped to lay the foundation for you
That's
to
right.
get where you are now.
That's right. That's right. With a sense of humor, most of us are all bald-headed old men. So these guys live long enough, they'll say, why were those guys bald? Well, because we lost our hair getting where we needed to be. Look at Booker, look at me, Middlebrook, all of us, bald-headed. Reverend, that's not for you.
That's hair well wasted.
That's right, that's right, that's right. We lost it along the way.
Along the way.
Buying tickets.
One thing I do is I'll make my grandchildren sit down and watch something that they don't want to watch.
Mm-hmm.
They'll say, Daddy, I don't want to watch about slavery. I don't want to watch Roots. It just makes me mad.
Yeah.
But like Middlebrook said, you have to know where we've been.
Yes,
It hadn't been that long, people.
that's right.
My great grandmother was a slave.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah, yeah.
So we all stand on someone's shoulders. There's no doubt.
right.
My young people, Jacqueline and Davion, is there anything else you want to ask that we haven't asked that you need to ask? I know we've got a lot of questions in the chat, and I'd love to have our panel be able to answer those questions and put those on our website. So I'll get those to each of the panelists and what we're able to get to. And when this is over, it will be recorded. We'll put it on the website. And eventually we're going to have a transcript of all of these so that we'll also have the questions answered by the panelists that didn't get answered. But I do want to give Davion and Jacqueline an opportunity. If there's something that's just really burning that they need to know before we get off this call, I want to make sure they have that opportunity.
I just want to say thank you. We appreciate you. We hope that everything that we do as the council, y'all are proud of what we do. I just want to say, we're going to try to make you proud every step we take. All that I have to say.
And you're going to get balls sooner or later.
I'm grateful to the Reverend Kessler. I'm grateful for these young people. I've known Davion's grandmother when she was a young girl. In fact, I helped baptize her, I think, and then his. I'm grateful to them because as I look at them, there's hope for the future. All is not lost. We still have some young people who are coming along who can appreciate where we've been and where we are, and we're going to depend on them to take us to where we need to be. I might be real old and can't hardly get about, but I want to always be able to stand there and say, go on, children, go on, carry on the struggle.
Jacqueline, thank you, Pastor.
Yes, I would have to agree with Davion. I just want to say thank you guys so much for being so honest and open about your experiences, because I've learned a lot on this panel for just these 2 hours, and I did graduate from Knox County School, and we never talked about any of this stuff. So I just want to say thank you so much for just being honest and open and sharing your knowledge with us.
Reverend Kessler, before we go, can I just get one other little point in?
Please, yes, sir.
I was born in Austin Holmes Project, Court B.
Robert Mentor is on here. I think he calls those the condo.
There you go, there you go, there you go. And to go from that to where I am now is amazing.
Yeah.
Life has amazing. When we were growing up, as all of you know, my brother who got to be mayor, even though for a short time, you don't know where God's going to carry you. And you could be at the bottom of the bottom and nobody sees a way out. But one thing is for sure, God has a rope that does not break and does not burn.
Yes, sir.
And a ladder where the steps on it, Middlebrook would say, they are never too hot.
Yes, sir.
So if you keep your hands in God's hand, you can climb that ladder.
Come on, brother.
Whatever pit you're in. Because if you can come from Court B to an elected bishop in the Amen Zion Church.
Yeah.
Middlebrook held a hand of Martin Luther King, and look at him now. His mind is still clear. He's a living witness to the voice of conversations held with Martin Luther King.
Yes, sir.
God has not taken you away.
Thank
so
you.
when we could not hear King's voice, we can hear about a king from a man who held his hand and stood in lines with him and sat at the table with God. Is amazing.
Yes, sir.
And who knows, Booker, with all the books that you've written, to all the theaters, all of you have done great things. We're only the seed, and generations yet unborn hopefully will look at us and say what was not has become possible. What was not has become possible. Thank you, Reverend Kessler, for bringing us together and for this golden opportunity. May God bless all of us.
Well, I want to, Bishop, thank you for those kind words. But I want to give each of you, if there's a last word you wanted to say, please, I want to give you an opportunity. We've got about 3 minutes left to put in the last word, maybe 30, 45 seconds, if you don't mind.
I've said mine.
Bishop, I'm glad you live in the luxury of Austin homes, because down in that bottom, we wasn't in no lap of luxury, no electricity, no hot running water. So you lived in luxury in the condos.
Oh, have mercy, have mercy. Yeah, poor people lived in the condos of the project long before white folks even thought about the word condos. We were living in condo-style houses long before they learned how to stack on top of each other. They let us live in low-level condos, and they said, "Oh, that's good housing," and we were running from it.
I grew up in a 3-room shotgun house, and when we moved in the Claiborne homes in Memphis, the condos, we thought we were really somebody, because all of a sudden we had hot and cold running water in the house.
Yes, yeah.
Had tile floors downstairs and hardwood floors upstairs.
Don't you see?
We thought we were somebody, but thanks be to God, look at what he's doing.
And you had windows that went up and down too.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Brother Lorenza Glasglow.
Yeah, just one thing. I know a lot's going on, but you know, in other countries, when there are food shortages, you'll see people with their hands out and they're trying to get grain.
Yes.
Do you realize that here people are driving up in luxury automobiles all over the country? Have you noticed on the news how well we're living?
Mm-hmm.
They'll show thousands of people, but they're all in cars.
Mm-hmm.
And they're wasting gas, and we are blessed.
Yes, still.
We're still blessed.
In spite of.
Through it all.
Through it all.
Through it all, we're blessed.
You better watch out. Middlebrook will be shouting in a minute.
And passing the plate.
And at the end of the picture, we'll be having a Reverend Glasgow or Reverend Booker.
That's right. Well, we might have to let them be deacons first and work their way up.
Well, I want to say thank you to all of you. You have been a delight. You've been very kind. You have been, I think, like Jacqueline and Davion said, your open honesty, your willingness to share has just been such an inspiration. So we thank you. Thank you for your support of Beck. All of you are just tremendous supporters of Beck, and we don't take that lightly. I do stand on the shoulders of a lot of great people. I do have hope with the Young People's Council too. So I'm very proud of Jacqueline and Davion and all of the folks who are involved in the Young People's Council, and we'll keep you posted on what they're doing. I want to thank all of you who are out there who have been watching and listening and commenting and being a part of this. Thank you so much for your support of Beck. Please continue to support Beck. If you're not a member, you can join on the membership on the website, beckcenter.net. Please remember, all of these will be recorded so you can watch them anytime. So this is history, and we're watching history as we're living it out and unfolding it. But I wish you would join with me in just thanking these 5 extraordinary men, knowing that there were women there as well, and I have their voices, and we're gonna have them recorded as well. But wherever you are, for just a moment, would you just pause and let's all together give a big hand clap to these amazing people: Dr. Harold Middlebrook, Mr. Lorenza Glasglow, Mr. Robert Booker, Bishop Warren Brown, and Dr. Theodis Robinson. Woohoo! And in cyber world, there's Mr. Booker. They have these little things where they can kind of click a thumbs up, and all kind of electrical things are going on, Mr. Booker. You just have to believe it's happening. You have to feel the spirit.
Thank you, Reverend Kessler. Thank you.
So thank
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Totally
you.
good show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you. And I want to also especially thank Discovery. They have been helping me behind the scenes. So all of those folks back there, Rodney, Kiki, Malcolm, Rocky, everybody, Harrison, that's back behind the scenes, helping us to put this on. Thank you so much. I don't take it lightly. These people volunteer their time to do this for Beck. And I'm very grateful to Discovery for the volunteer, for the service, and for the assistance. And to all of you who support the Beck, thank you so much. To all of our young people and everybody watching in our country, these people give us hope because they've given us words of wisdom, and it is incumbent upon us to continue to go forward, as I heard them say. So good night to all of you. Thank you again, and look forward to seeing you on the next Beck Racial Justice Conversation. We'll see you in February. There'll be other events coming up in January, so check the website, beckcenter.net. If you haven't, sign up for the e-newsletter so you'll always know what's happening at the Beck. Thank you so much. God bless you. Stay safe and stay well. Good night, everyone.
All right. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Goody, goody, goody. Whew.